Thank you for being here. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We will get started in just one more minute. Okay, someone is saying that they can't hear in the chat. I'm just going to check and see if others can hear me. Can you just give me a thumbs up if you hear me? Okay, it might be that person. Chanel Cody, I suggest either trying to turn your volume up or logging out, logging back in. I don't think that there is a sound issue. All right, it's 6 o'clock. Thank you everyone for joining us. We are so excited that you can join us for the WBEC-East Legal Series for summer 2023. My name is Joyce Kadeska. I am the Women's Business Center Director at WBEC-East. I'm joined by Elliot Gilkson, our Program Coordinator, in addition to Melanie McLeod, our outsourced facilitator and one-on-one business counselor. Today, we have 4 amazing speakers that will talk to you today about covering your legal bases. And before we get into introductions and the topic of the hour, I just wanted to share with you just a little bit about WBEC-East and what we do, and just a little bit about us. So WBEC-East is a nonprofit founded in 1995. We support women entrepreneurs through business training and certification options. Our 2 funders are the SBA, the U.S. Small Business Administration, and WBEC, the Women's Business Enterprise National Council, a national certifier for women business and enterprises. Our staff includes Elliot, myself, in addition to Liz Walsh, our president. At the Women's Business Center, we provide entrepreneurial training in 3 ways. One is through workshops that help you do things from write a business plan to think about legal issues and considerations, as well as financial literacy. The second way we do business with entrepreneurs and support them is through our online on-demand courses through Ed2Go. And we'll have a bunch of links for you at the end to let you know a little bit more about our resources. And finally, through one-on-one business counseling through professional coaches. Melanie, who's on the call, is our professional coach who is outsourced to help us do this work. Some of the courses we provide include this legal series. We also work with Google on topics around marketing, around ads, SEO, etc. And we also have a partnership with a number of organizations that can continue to support you. Okay, so today we have the legal series, and our topic is covering your legal bases. Our 4 speakers are Rachel Rowe, an associate at McNeese Law, Abby Junta, an attorney at McNeese Law, Sarah Holmes, managing attorney at Holmes Business Law, PC, and Christina Rieger, Esquire, law and compliance counselor and founder at Lutel Law. I hope I pronounced everything right. What I would like to do is go ahead and introduce also, as mentioned, Elliot Gilkson and Melanie McLeod. Let's go around and have each speaker, and I'll call you, and then you can ping pong it to the next speaker to introduce themselves. So we're going to start with Rachel.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Rowe. I'm an attorney at McNeese, Wallace & Nurick. I work in our Harrisburg office, and I'm in our real estate group. So in my practice, I assist individuals and companies with buying, selling, or leasing commercial properties. I also do land use. And so in that practice, I will help business owners obtain certain zoning relief in front of municipal bodies so that they can use their property for a particular purpose. Okay, I'll ping it to Abby.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Abby Junta. I am also an attorney with McNeese, Wallace & Nurick, also in the Harrisburg office. But my focus is upon employment law. And my clients are small, medium, and large size businesses, also state agencies and government municipalities. I counsel clients basically from right after the formation of their business through hiring, evaluation, and even sometimes discharge of employees. And then I'm frequently also on the back end, if worst case scenario arrives and there is litigation, I defend employers in all types of litigation, including employment discrimination and non-compete issues. I will send it over to Christina.
Hi, everybody. My name is Christina Rieger, and I'm the founder of Lutel Law. We are a full-service employment law firm focusing on the employer side primarily. We work with employers like Abby on everything from post-formation, hiring employees, strategically planning terminations, dealing with non-competes, but we also represent employers in agency disputes, Department of Labor investigations, workplace investigations. If your company has a complaint of harassment and you want to investigate it, as well as we are a full service diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting firm. So I'm happy to be here, and I will jump it over to Sarah.
Hi, thank you. I'm Sarah Holmes. I've been an attorney for 17 years now. I started out by defending businesses from lawsuits. And while I did that type of work, I started a business on the side. I was able to grow that business a little bit, but ultimately I was able to meet a lot of other business owners and entrepreneurs, and people started to ask me for legal advice. And I discovered I really, really loved counseling small business owners and entrepreneurs. So about 10 years ago, I started my own law firm, which is Holmes Business Law PC, where now all of our clients are business owners. We provide mostly, I would call it like general counsel, outsourced services, along with trademark registrations as well for business owners. And happy to be here tonight. So thank you. I'm not sure who to give it to now. Melanie?
Back to me.
Back to you? Okay, great.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for introducing yourselves. So I just want to start off the session with a quick disclaimer that I'm going to read. And then I want to talk about the rest of the series. So in case anyone's interested in joining the rest of the sessions. So no liability is assumed with respect to the use of information presented in this session. The information is intended for educational purposes only and should not be considered as providing legal advice. Laws may be amended and court rulings made that could affect a particular procedure, issue, or interpretation that may be included in this session. None of the professionals on this call, nor any instructors or authors, assume responsibility for errors or omission, nor any liability for damages resulting from the use of information contained herein. Please contact your local attorney for legal advice. Okay, so we got that part done. And so I just wanted to share with everyone about this legal series. So tonight we're going to talk about sort of the general basics of covering your legal bases. And that's going to include conversation around entity structure, some a little bit about insurance, some about intellectual property, trademark, in licenses and inspections, we're going to have employment law talked about on this call. That's for today. Now, next Thursday at 6 p.m., we have So You Want to Get Your LLC. And for those of you on the call interested in thinking about opening an LLC or understanding the difference between an LLC and certain other type of entities, you want to join this session. And our final session on the 27th, another Thursday at 6 p.m., will be how to hire your first employee or employees, where we'll talk about the legal requirements of hiring, in addition to the financial aspects and recruiting aspects as well. So that's an overview of our series. And I'm actually excited to kick off our panel questions, which will go for approximately a half an hour, and then we will open it up at the end for a Q&A. All right, if you're ready, put in the chat, I'm ready. And we will get started tonight. All right. Yes, yes, Teresa. Excited. Yes, Natasha. Yes, Rosemary. Let's go. All right, we're going to get started. People are ready. So, covering your legal bases, the first question I wanted to talk about today is the idea of business formation. When we think about the entities that exist and forming a business entity, can panelists talk about, and we can go in any order, anyone can answer, what are the important considerations to think about when thinking of structuring your business entity? And I'll leave it open.
And I can go quickly because I know I'm definitely like the more of the generalist slash trademark person. So this is probably a good one for me to answer. So you want to think about how to protect yourself, obviously, from liability when you start to do business. And there's a lot of different ways that you can go out into the world and do business. And one of the ways you can do business is as yourself, your own person. That's how a lot of people start out. But the problem with that is you have no legal protection. So if you do something wrong, or you get into a dispute, maybe with a customer or a client, or maybe even someone trips and falls in your office and cracks their head open, that person has no choice but to sue you, the individual person, right? Which means now that, any type of assets you potentially have or whatever you might have built up in your business, all that stuff is now potentially exposed to liability and exposed to risk. So when you start, you want to think about, how do I insulate those things? And I think that in the beginning, some people say, well, I don't really have anything yet. I haven't built this business up. And that's really the wrong way to think about it. You want to go into starting and building a business for success. Like, this is going to be successful. I'm going to grow this. And you want to put those protections into place from day one. You don't want to wait until it's too late. So if you wait, 2 years down the line, and then you call me and you say, hey, Sarah, I need to set up an LLC. I have this potential claim coming up. I'm really worried. Yes, I can set up your LLC for you now, but that's not going to go back and protect whatever things, you might be exposing yourself to that you've done in the past. So you want to think about protecting yourself. And the number one way to do that, aside from insurance and some other things we'll talk about later, is by forming a legal entity around yourself to protect you. So that would be forming an LLC. Once in a while, you want to form a corporation, but for 9 out of 10 people, that answer is an LLC. And it can be just you, can be a single person, but at least then you're giving yourself some type of protection by having a legal entity set up.
And I can tack on to that, that I wholeheartedly agree with Sarah, but I always advise clients to check with your accountant, talk to them about what your tax implications are based on what structure you choose. And if you have a partner or you're going into business with somebody else, it's so important to have an agreement and to have the big decisions made right in the beginning when things are good and things are happy. I'm sure every employment lawyer on this call will tell you it's very difficult to come to decisions when everybody hates everybody. And we hope that never happens, but it's easy to do when everyone's happy. And I can tell you that taking that extra $1 or $2 or $5 to spend on an attorney for an hour or two will be worth its weight in gold if there's a problem down the road. So it's always better to be proactive and address the issues and get the information that you need before you start.
Like you said, Christina, taking care of all of the decisions and getting things set up structurally before things get messy.
Awesome. This is a great start. And so one of the things I'd like to ask our speakers today is, when we think about LLC, we'll talk about this next time. What are the key considerations? I've heard the word liability on this call already. What are those considerations around entity structure, and who should someone consult if they're trying to figure out what type of entity to form?
I'll jump in first. there's a few choices, and I think as attorneys, we typically run through those choices. The natural fit for most businesses, unless you're acquiring something that's already existing or already has a big revenue stream, would be an LLC, and that would protect you individually, your house, whatever assets you have, to better extent than if you just go out on your own. But I always have people talk to their accountant, because the lawyer does not know what the financial situation is and what they anticipate the revenue stream to be in the first year. So I always say you need to have a discussion with the accountant, or the three of us need to get on the phone call together to really discuss what the best structure is for you. And some of that comes into play based on what you're planning to do. For example, I have a client that invests in real estate, and we knew that she was going to invest in more than one piece of commercial real estate. So what we did was we created an overarching LLC, and then for every home that she buys, multifamily home, she creates another LLC under it that's owned by that LLC. So now she has like double protection before someone can get to her. And each entity has its own LLC. So if, to Sarah's point, if somebody slips in front on the sidewalk, they can only go after that one building and not the second building. So it's really important to look at what the bigger goal is, so that we can set it up properly at the outset.
Thank you. Well, let's switch gears a little bit. This is a great question, and we actually have a comment in the chat echoing some of the things about having been down a bad path around operating agreements and things. So thank you so much for that insight. So when we think about reducing liability, a couple of topics come to mind, namely insurance and taxes. I'd love to hear from any one of you around the importance of these two functions in starting a new business.
All right, so I can jump in. So I always try to teach my clients that you have to look holistically at how to protect yourself from liability. Like, there's all these tools you can use, and not one of them on their own is bulletproof and will fully protect you always. Like, even if you set up an LLC, if you are the one, like, let's say you have a consulting business, right? And you set up an LLC to protect you, but you're the only one working in the business, and you are the consultant, and you personally give someone bad advice. You can't hide behind that LLC and not be named personally in that lawsuit. It doesn't work that way. If, however, you've set up this LLC for your consulting business and you have a contract with someone and the name on the contract is your LLC, and you end up in a breach of contract, now that LLC will protect you. But you can see, like, sometimes there's holes and there's gaps to be filled. So where do we go to fill those gaps and holes? Well, the second place we go is insurance. Like, you should always have the right type of insurance for your business. And I guarantee you, for almost any type of problem you can think of, I guarantee you there's an insurance policy that covers that. I think the employment lawyers will tell you there's one that sometimes we see people do not have, which is like EPLI, employment type coverage, and they can speak to what that would do. Sometimes those are like magical for people that have employees. Otherwise, you got to be thinking about general liability policies. If you are that consultant, you need a policy that protects you. If you give someone that negligent advice and they sue you, that's the type of policy that would pick up that type of claim. But you really need to get a good insurance person. Like, I wouldn't just go to like your local State Farm person, which is great, by the way. I have all my personal stuff there, but like, they're not necessarily well versed in what types of business policies you might need and what are the differences between them, because there's a big difference between a general liability policy and then that policy I told you that would protect you if you gave someone bad advice. Those are different. So somebody has to be knowledgeable enough to tell you which policies might cover you. So in protecting yourself, the second place you go is insurance. And then what I tell people is the third place you go to protect yourself is in your contracts. Contracts have all kinds of language in them. Usually it's a lot of stuff at the end called like indemnification and limitations of liability, disclaimers, warranties. Those are places where it looks like a lot of boilerplate and people's eyes glaze over and they don't read half of it. That's a mistake, because those are also places you can go to protect yourself from liability, to potentially shift liability of someone else to the other person you're in the contract with. So if you use all these things together between the entity, the insurance, and contracts, you can like do a pretty good job of insulating yourself. So that would be my advice, is you got to use all these tools together. Not one is going to magically, do it all for you.
I can also piggyback off of that. So from a real estate standpoint, if you're purchasing property, we always advise our clients to get title insurance. It's one of the best ways in which, if a property is encumbered by, a mortgage, or there's an unrecorded easement or something that's in the title that doesn't get revealed upon, you reviewing the documents, title insurance will protect the homeowner in that case. So we always recommend getting a title search, getting title insurance, having a real estate attorney thoroughly review, what is on the property, what's come before, how can we clean up title. And then another one, like Sarah was saying, contracts. So in your purchase agreement, you want to be looking at, those tax provisions and, okay, what is something that the buyer is going to be paying for versus the seller? And hiring an attorney in that situation is really important because they will know what's customary. So in Pennsylvania, it is customary for a buyer and a seller to equally split realtor transfer tax. In other states, it could be different. And there's also provisions regarding prorations. Okay, the county taxes will be prorated, the school taxes will be prorated as of the closing date. Those are things you want to be looking for in your agreements.
It's a little shift from, straight insurance or things like that. But another separation of liability that comes to mind from my perspective is, as you're getting up and started and getting all of these things in place, consider some sort of agreement with your higher level employees that contains language that protects you, so that, obviously in Pennsylvania, we're an at-will employment state, so you can terminate them for any reason, but you can also drop these agreements so that you're further secured and limiting liability for what they can come after you with. And you're also protecting yourself and your business from any of the confidential information that they might gather while they're with you, any trade secret information, and just particular customers and their information that you want to prevent them from leaving you with and taking elsewhere. So it's not really insurance or taxes, but it's just one way to keep your liability protected further as well.
Thank you. So on the topic of taxes, if we can just touch on that a little bit. We talked about accountants. From a legal perspective, what relationship do legal professionals and accountants have for new small business owners in understanding their tax exposure, their tax potential liability, and how to actually get set up for success and protection?
I can say that it's interesting because I get so many referrals from accountants, and it's usually because something's not set up initially correctly. So because I deal more with the employers, particularly if they have employees, it's usually a Department of Labor audit, a payroll issue, so, a misclassified employee. So I can tell you that the accountants are the ones that see those errors or see them first if they have this knowledge. And so it's not so much a tax issue, but it is something that we work very closely with accountants once those issues are identified. Because if the Department of Labor comes in, the accountant they can provide you with documents, but they're not the ones that are going to be going up against the Department of Labor. So we work hand in hand with them, and we educate them on this is what you need to look for. If you have a lot of 1099s, you really need to reevaluate this business, and we can work with them on that.
Thank you. All right, we are going to actually switch gears and talk a little bit about intellectual property. What types of business should have a strong focus on intellectual property, trademark protection, and at what phase of the business formation should this be addressed? So as an example, so one of the things that we do at WBEC-East is we run a course, a business plan writing course called Fast Track. And our wonderful facilitator, Melanie, always says to the class, and I completely agree, if you have an idea, don't keep it to yourself. Share, 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 because the more you share, the more folks are going to hear about what you want to do, and the more, exposure you get. And a lot of our students come in, and a lot of people, even I know in my own personal networks, they'll say, oh, but it's my idea. I wonder if someone's going to take it. And I'm nervous to like put something on the website, because then if my name is taken, then I can't, build my website or manufacture my t-shirts or whatever it is. So I would love to hear from this panel. At what phase is it important to really think about IP, and which types of businesses should really have a strong focus on intellectual property?
Okay, I can start with that one. So sometimes it depends on the business, the type of business, and what they're doing. Like, so for example, if you're starting a consulting company, the name of the consulting company is your own name, and people are coming to you because it's you, like, yes, you can brand it, but essentially you are that brand, and you might not be looking to go file a trademark because it's your own name, and that, might not make sense in some ways. However, when people get into what I would call like really competitive, clever, trendy businesses, so anything in my mind, I try to tell people, anything with food products, pets, stuff for kids, cosmetics, beauty, fitness, health, wellness, those are like really competitive, sort of like edgy industries where people heavily invest in branding for those types of businesses. And oftentimes those are the people that come to me, especially if they come in with a clever name, that I tell them, this is probably something that you want to think about submitting for a trademark sooner rather than later, because with a trademark, you have rights to it as soon as you use it, but the difference in a registration is, number one, like you'd have better remedies if someone infringes on it later. And number two, that will then live in a database where hopefully if someone else is starting a business, they'll see that that name is already registered or in process and won't use your name. So getting a registration in is important. Also, when you file is important. Like we've had clients that, for whatever reason, we advise them to file right away. They don't want to spend the money. They've waited a couple of months. Like I literally had a guy wait 4 months. By the time he came back, someone had filed in the meantime for the exact name in a similar category, and that was now going to block his application. It was going to be a problem. So the longer you wait, potentially the more problems you create for yourself. And also to the extent that you get some traction and people start to notice you, that can attract certain types of problems. Like you can get cyber squatters who start to buy up your domain names. You can get people that open social media accounts under your name because they notice you haven't bothered to like pick them up yet. So it can start to create problems the longer you wait, but it's not necessarily necessary, and definitely not necessarily the beginning for every type of business. But again, going back to like, what type of business do you have? If you have a more competitive, trendy business, I would definitely think about doing that sooner rather than later. If you have, so trademark would cover like your branding, your brand elements, like a name, a slogan, tagline, logo, that's trademark stuff. To the extent you have an invention, right? Like I invented something, I have a totally new process. Now, I'm not a patent lawyer, but that might be something that's a patent. And that's the sort of process where like you want to keep that stuff secret. So you go talk to the patent lawyer. So to the extent what you have is an actual invention of something, you got to be talking to that person right away to figure out what you should and should not be disclosing to people. As far as like your general business ideas, like sometimes we have people that maybe they're doing a food product, maybe they're doing a beauty product, and they have like a recipe or formula for that thing, right? And they have to start talking though to people that are going to make that thing for them. They have to talk to labs, or they have to talk to manufacturers or packers. And they're worried because, hey, I have to disclose this recipe so they can price out how much it'll cost them to make that. Well, those people, like you have signed a non-disclosure agreement that says they're not going to take your stuff, they're not going to take your recipe, they're not going to use it for their own profit. So that too, in the beginning, you want to have really good agreements in place. there so that if you have to disclose these things for potential vendor relationships, you have some protection on that end. And I know the employment lawyers, they can talk about how you protect yourself with your own employees taking stuff too, because that really can be a concern for people as well.
It's funny, Sarah, I was just thinking that. I was like, well, I have to jump in on the employee side, because whether you have an executive coming in or somebody departing, like those clauses, whether it's a freestanding trademark, trade secret type of a confidentiality agreement, or it's a severance agreement, people tend to gloss over those trademark, trade secret paragraphs, confidentiality, where it says we protect this, and there's like a list of 50 things. Read that carefully, think through it, think through what your business is and what you want to protect, and make it tailored to your needs. Those standard agreements have everything in the kitchen sink in them that you might not need. So it's really important to think through what you want to protect and make sure that that agreement is tailored to who you are and what your business is about.
There actually was a question about non-disclosure agreements in the chat. So if we could spend a little bit more time talking about those, and also like non-compete clauses within, especially within employee contracts, I think that would be really beneficial for people.
So with regard to the non-disclosure, I would love to discuss that. The non-competes, I'm going to hold on to that one for our final session on how to hire your first employee. And we can hold that for that conversation. Any additional, thank you, Elliot, for pointing out the chat. Any additional insights into non-disclosure agreements that the audience should be aware of?
Well, I don't want to repeat what's already been said, but I think the non-disclosure agreement is a great asset for an employer. Your ideas, not just inventions, but ideas are your bread and butter. That's why you have a company. That's your competitive advantage. And so to the extent that you really need to hold on to that information, the secret recipe, the secret sauce, whatever it may be that draws your customers to you, a non-disclosure agreement can certainly protect you with employees leaving. Best idea is to get one in place, that first day that they walk in the door, make sure they've seen it, make sure that you've gone over it with them, they sign it. But when they're leaving and going out the door, a good reminder to let them know that they have that. If they don't have one in place, consider a severance agreement so that you can put that out there again. You want to make sure that whether they're coming in or going out, you've covered your bases and that you've got that agreement in place.
Awesome. I do see other questions in the chat. Christina, after your comment, I want to move on to the next topic, and then the additional questions we'll take at the Q&A.
I just have one more thought, only because I just dealt with this yesterday. As small business owners, I think a lot of times there's a tendency to use independent contractors. And that's great too. But if you're using independent contractors, consider non-disclosure agreements for them too. Particularly if you're doing something and they're going to see part of your business operation. That's an area where people don't always think about using non-disclosure agreements. And so whether you're the contractor that's contracting with a bigger entity, or the small business that's contracting with a bigger entity, or you're bringing a contractor in, that might be something that you might want to consider using an NDA for.
Great, thank you. So let's talk about licensing and inspections. When it comes to L&I, what are some key resources that every entrepreneur should be aware of? It will depend on where you live and what state you're in, what municipality, but overall, and then maybe we can focus on general Philadelphia. Anyone have any insights into licenses and inspections and what every entrepreneur should be aware of?
I can speak to this. So like you said, every municipality is completely different in how they treat licensing, inspections, their process, what's available on their website. So I always recommend to have clients look on their website, and first get a feel for, okay, what are they putting out there? What are the application forms? How thorough is their website with explaining the process? And then honestly, I always give them a call. It's always best to just jump on the phone. They'll be more than happy to explain the process. It helps both you and the municipality because they want to make sure that, it's not getting kicked back. It's a thorough process that you're, going through. And specifically in the city of Philadelphia, they have everything online. And I was just dealing with this for a client recently. And, the website says one thing and it's very thorough, but jumping on a call, I realized, okay, before they actually apply for a commercial activity license, they need to do X, Y, and Z first. So had I just looked on the website, I wouldn't have known that. And so I always think it's really important, review the website, but also get on the phone with someone. They'll be more than happy to explain everything to you. And in the city of Philadelphia, you can just, log on your computer and start filling out the information. It gets submitted to the city of Philadelphia. Then you get a status report and you can see where your application is in the process, which is really, really nice. But again, that's not the case in every municipality.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything to add on this topic? Okay.
So just quickly, I would say at least before COVID, I don't know what they're doing anymore, but in Philadelphia, you used to be able to just go down to the MSB building in the basement. And if you really wanted to, you could go in there, like talk to an actual human being. I know during COVID, they didn't let people in there for like a really long time. They might have opened that up again. So if you get really stuck, you might just want to go down there and talk to them. And then kind of piggybacking a bit, like if you do call them and you get someone on the phone, I would absolutely get their direct number and then only call that person going forward so that you can keep getting help after that. Like keep that number with your life.
I love that. And there's a question in the chat about the dissolution of licenses. When is it advisable to dissolve a license, or is that ever advisable? And I'm not sure if there needs to be more clarification, but that question is in the chat.
I don't know if I've heard of like dissolve a license. I mean, you can dissolve your business entity, and then basically what happens, this is largely a tax accounting issue. Your accountant needs to close out all your tax accounts, which is usually what is tied to that business license in the first place. After you've done like final returns and paid off all your final taxes, it gets closed that way. But that's largely like you gotta file all the taxes and be done with that. So your accountant would normally handle that part.
Got it. Thank you. Okay. I'm going to move on to the next topic. And as we get to the Q&A, it looks like we have a good number of questions coming in that we can touch on. So the next part of this is going to be around employment law. So when working with staff members, what are some legal responsibilities that an employer has to be aware of? And what are some key laws that are important also to be aware of?
I can jump on this one. The first law is the Fair Labor Standards Act. That is the key federal law that governs whether somebody is an employee or an independent contractor. It's right now, there's a proposed revision that we're waiting to get finalized. And it also governs whether somebody is salaried and exempt from overtime or non-exempt from overtime. And there's tests laid out in that law. So that is key. You don't just salary somebody based on what you think they do. There's a 6-factor test. But there's also analogous state laws. One is the Pennsylvania Wage Payment and Collection Act. And these laws are very, very pro-employee. They permit for class action lawsuits. I mean, these are things you don't want to get wrong. And so much right now, especially with small businesses, you want to use independent contractors. And that is just the biggest target for businesses right now. And that's what the new proposed revisions address, but not in a way that's beneficial. Gig workers are independent contractors, and the Department of Labor wants them to be employees.
Thank you, Christina. Abby, did you want to add to that?
I was going to say, I guess, I don't know where it would fall in line below the FLSA, but also your discrimination laws. So there's federal, there's state, and some municipalities have local. In Pennsylvania, we have the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act. You need to be aware of these, the expectation of how you treat your employees. Once you have a certain number and you meet a threshold, these different laws apply to you. Most importantly is knowing that there are agencies like the EEOC and the PHRC out there who handle these claims for your employees potentially. And if they contact you, don't ignore it. Engage with them, participate with them, but also know that this is kind of stage one of what could be a lengthy process. So be cautious, be careful what you disclose, consult an attorney if possible. These are, these discrimination, harassment, retaliation laws, whether or not you feel you did anything wrong, and you may not have at all, they are again drawn very leniently towards the employee side. So as an employer, you need to be aware of them. You need to have policies and practices in place to protect yourself early and upfront. But if you're faced with them, you need to address them and plan, a defense early so that you're not struggling to catch up later down the road.
Thank you. Can someone talk about FMLA and any sort of family-related laws that are important from this employment law regard?
I can take that. FMLA is really, really challenging, but it only applies if you have more than 50 employees. Where I see small businesses get hung up is they don't realize that, and they put it in their handbook that they download a handbook from LegalZoom, and it has those provisions in it. And the courts have held, if you have that in there, even if you only have 5 employees, you're going to be required to abide by it. So it's something as easy as, downloading a handbook that has policies in it that don't apply to you, the courts will then apply to you. The other big law is the ADA. That only applies if you have 15 employees. And now just recently, the Pregnancy Discrimination Act, I forget the exact title, which was just passed as a federal law. These laws just require employers to enter into an accommodation interactive process to see if they can accommodate that employee's request. So these don't, like Abby said, don't ignore them. Don't be afraid of them. But certainly if you have questions, consult with a lawyer and get your questions answered.
I was muted. Thank you for that, Christina. So the other two that you mentioned in addition to the FMLA were the ADA and the pregnancy. Are there other laws, this is in the chat, are there other laws that don't apply to smaller businesses below a certain threshold that you can think of in addition to those 3?
Abby, you want to take this one? I'm thinking. Can you see my eyes scrolling through the file cabinet, my brain?
I know the PHRC applies. I just don't remember how many employees you have to have for that.
I want to say it's 4. It's a very low threshold. That is the one that is probably most applicable to small businesses. I think the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act is 15, and then they grow from there.
And the Philly sick leave law, if you're a Philadelphia business, I think you have to have, is it 5?
5 or 7. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's 5. So, and that, if you're a Philadelphia business, you have to comply with that. And that one is one that small businesses don't realize applies to them, but that requires you to offer sick leave for your employees, paid sick leave. And if you're under 5, you have to offer it, but it's not paid.
Got it. Thank you. We are getting a lot of amazing information. Thank you. So we are at the point in our program where we're going to ask each panelist, this is the last question. We're going to ask each panelist to share parting words of wisdom with the audience, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A. So while they do that, if there are questions that you haven't put in the chat, go ahead and put them there. We're going to address the questions in the chat first, and then we're going to open it up to do the raised hands function. Okay, so we're going to go with Rachel, Abby, Sarah, and then Christina. So Rachel, take it away.
Yeah. Biggest takeaway when you're reviewing a lease or a purchase agreement, any type of contract that you're getting into, I can't say this enough. Please have an attorney set their eyes on it, because it really will help you. And as far as reducing your liability, there's just some provisions that, even if your landlord or, whoever the other side is giving you an agreement, you don't have to agree to their terms. There are ways in which attorneys can help you negotiate and leverage so that, you are protected. So I really recommend hiring an attorney, having them look at it, and really expressing what your business is like so that they can make sure it's tailored to your needs.
So I suppose it's my turn to jump in there. I think from my experience, what I see with businesses that's most beneficial to them is, especially in the labor market that we've experienced recently, it seems to be improving, but gaining and keeping good employees is difficult. But it's also, your legal requirement to be a good employer, to be fair, to be impartial with your employees, to treat everyone the same, equitable. Make sure that you have a system in place for them to come to you, to complain, and to reflect what their feelings are in the company. I mean, they're your big investment. They are the face of the company sometimes. So their happiness or unhappiness can reflect upon you and the business and the culture of your business. But that being said, also, as you're dealing with your employees, document everything. To the extent that there is a problem down the road, your biggest strength is going to be records of every communication with those employees, everything about any leave or anything that they've requested. Make sure that you document and preserve it.
All right, thank you, Abby. Melanie, any consultant words of wisdom?
Oh, sorry, we're going to go with Sarah and then Christina, and then we're going to go to Melanie.
Okay.
Sorry. So I'd say when you start a business, you don't know what you don't know, and that can be really dangerous because you could set things up. You can go to LegalZoom, you can grab documents from other people from other states, and you might be fine. And you might be fine for a long time until all of a sudden one day you're not fine and someone's suing you and you find out your contract's terrible and you've been doing things wrong the whole way. And now you have a big mess on your hands, and now you really have something to lose because you've managed to make your business successful, and it could all come tumbling down, which sounds terrible and it's like a worst case scenario, but it sometimes happens. So you should consult with somebody before you need them, right? And at least have someone fill in for you what things you don't know and put things on your radar so that even if right now you're not in a place to invest, money in legal services, at least you know what you should look out for, so that if something happens in the future, you're like, oh, I remember she mentioned that word. That word's bad. I need to go back and call that lawyer now because that's like pinging, my spidey senses, and this could go very badly for me. Especially when you're starting out. Like, I've started several businesses, so I really, really empathize that in the beginning, sometimes you have a lot more time than you have money. But at some point, almost all lawyers will do at least an hour-long consultation with you. It might not be free, but it's also not going to be thousands of dollars to just sit down and talk to someone and be like, tell me what I need to know about this. And like, yes, you can go Google stuff because the sum of human knowledge is on the internet, but like, you don't know what stuff actually applies to you. So like Christina said, if you're putting like, oh, the FMLA, you can have leave in your handbook and you have 2 employees. Well, like, that's ridiculous. And you didn't need to know that in the first place. You just found it on the internet and thought you should put it in there. So it's worth your while to spend like a little bit of money and just have consultations with people just to get stuff on your radar, to know later when, you know, you're going to recognize a word, and then, you know, understand this is now when I go back to a lawyer and I might need like legal help.
Thank you. Christina, final words.
It's really hard to go last because all of their advice was so good. But to Sarah's point, I think I can give you an example. I had a client who had an operating agreement that they pulled off the internet, and when they got into a dispute, they had an arbitration clause that required them to arbitrate in Idaho. They were both from Philadelphia, and they were like, why do we have to go to Idaho? I'm like, because the contract you signed says so. So, I mean, that's just an example of like the life that we live as employment lawyers. But also I think I think it's so important. You all have a vision of what you want, what your company wants, what you want to do. And so think about that. And we offer initial consultations all the time at a discounted rate, particularly for WBEC members. And so sit with somebody, say, this is what I want to do. I want to hire employees, or I need help, but I can't afford an employee. How do I protect myself if I need to hire an independent contractor just to get me to that level where I can hire that employee? So just, working through what that 2-year plan looks like, or, how that works, and how can you protect yourself to get to that next level. And the last thing I want to tell you, going back to the insurance, is cyber insurance, particularly if you're a business that relies on the computer, the internet, sales, cyber insurance. Work with an independent broker. That's the best way to go, because they will shop it around. They will shop all your insurance policies around to all the carriers and get you the best rate. So those are my couple parting words of wisdom.
Thank you. I'm going to punt it over to Melanie and Elliot to see if there's anything else that you want to add. Melanie, you're muted.
Yes, I was muted. Thank you, Joyce. So yes, I just wanted to especially thank all the lawyers that came tonight, because this is incredible information. And I can tell you, as a business coach and consultant, it's one of the things I tell people all the time: make your lawyer part of your planning process. Make sure that you budget when you're doing your projections, to have some hours in there to make sure you can talk to them before. Because if you don't, when you need to talk to them later, sometimes it can really turn into a not very good experience and a very expensive one. So it's really important to talk to lawyers at the beginning and make sure that you're not making critical errors. I've seen people who have started LLCs and put themselves on payroll, not really understanding the difference. There's just so many things that I've seen. And sometimes I'm looking at them like, really, you needed to have a business plan. You needed to consult with a business coach and a lawyer and an accountant way before you got this deep in. So please listen to everything that they've told you. It will save you a lot of grief.
Thank you, Melanie.
Yeah, and to just kind of piggyback off of that, get a business lawyer to consult with, get an accountant that specializes in small business accounting to offer you the best financial advice for your company. Find an independent insurance broker who can shop around, like Christina said, and find you the best coverage that you need for your particular business, beyond just automatically always getting that general liability insurance. In my experience, getting that general liability insurance and then finding the experts to rely on really helped me the most, especially early on with my old cleaning company.
Thank you. We all heard a lot of good information tonight. I just wanted to, before we stop the recording and go into the Q&A, I want to say on behalf of WBEC-East, Rachel, Abby, Sarah, Christina, thank you so much for being here to really impart wisdom and knowledge and insights around covering your legal bases. We can go ahead and stop the recording here, please.